In this video, we are going to learn how to multiply fractions using cross-cancellation. Cross-cancellation is a method that we can use to make multiplying fractions easier. When we use cross-cancellation, what we do is, before multiplying the fractions, we first of all cancel any factors found both in a numerator and the opposite denominator. This allows us to work with smaller numbers, and hence the problem becomes easier. To understand this method, let us consider an example. Let us consider 40 over 21 times 7 over 20. Now what we need to do is cancel any factors found both in a numerator and the opposite denominator. What does that mean? That means we consider the numerator of one fraction and the denominator of the other fraction. Now the numerators are the numbers on top. So the numerator for the first fraction is 40. And what will the opposite denominator be? That will be the number on the bottom of the other fraction. So the number on the bottom of 7 over 20, which is 20. So 40 and 20 will be a numerator and the opposite denominator. And we're going to cancel any factors found in both of these numbers. So what we're actually doing is we're looking for a common factor along this diagonal. And next what we're going to do is we're going to consider the other numerator and the opposite denominator. That is, we're going to consider the numerator for the second fraction, and that numerator is 7. And what is the opposite denominator? That will be the denominator of the first fraction. So we have 21. And we're going to look for a common factor between these two numbers. So what are we doing? Now we are going to look for a common factor along this diagonal. And this is actually why we call the method cross-cancellation. We can see that we have formed a big cross. So now let us apply the method and multiply these two fractions. So first of all, we're going to look for a common factor between 40 and 20. Now note that 20 is a common factor of both these numbers. So what we're going to do is we're going to divide both of these numbers by 20. Now if we divide 40 by 20, what we get is 2. And if we divide 20 by 20, what we get is 1. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to look for a common factor of 7 and 21. Now 7 is a common factor of both these numbers. So we divide 7 by 7 to obtain 1, and we divide 21 by 7 to obtain 3. So now we're going to write what we end up with. Here we have 2 over 3, and then we have 1 over 1. So let's write that down. 2 over 3 times 1 over 1. So the numbers obtained are all small numbers and are thus much easier to work with. So how do we multiply two fractions? We multiply the numerators, and that will be the numerator of the product, and we multiply the denominators to obtain the denominator of the product. So first of all, we write the fraction line, and in the numerator, we multiply the numerators 2 and 1. So let's write that. So we have 2 times 1. And in the denominator, we will multiply the denominators of the original two fractions. So we multiply 3 and 1. So here we have 3 times 1. So 2 times 1 is 2, and 3 times 1 is 3. And so this is our required answer. That is 40 over 21 times 7 over 20. This is equal to 2 over 3. Now in this case, note that we found the greatest common factor for each numerator and its opposite denominator. The greatest common factor for 20 and 40 is 20, and we use 20 to divide these two numbers. And the greatest common factor of 7 and 21 is 7, and we divided both these numbers by 7. Now it is possible to use the method of cross-cancellation with any other factor. We don't always have to use the greatest common factor. The only difference is that if we use any other factor, then we'll need to do more simplifying at the end. That is, in this case, we obtained 2 over 3. We did not need to simplify this at all. This is already a simplified fraction. But if we use some other factor, then we need to simplify at the end. Let's see what we mean by that. Let us consider that same example, 40 over 21 times 7 over 20. We're going to use cross-cancellation again. So we're going to look for a common factor between 40 and 20, And we're also going to look for a common factor between 7 and 21. Now note that 10 is a common factor of 20 and 40. It is not the greatest common factor, but it is a common factor. So let's use the number 10. 20 divided by 10 is 2, and 40 divided by 10 is 4. And for 7 and 21, once again, let us use 7. 7 divided by 7 is 1. 21 divided by 7 is 3. So what do we end up with? We end up with 4 over 3 times 1 over 2. So let us write that. 4 over 3 times 1 over 2. Now how do we multiply two fractions? We multiply the numerators and we divide this by the product of the denominators. So we have 4 times 1, that is 4. And in the denominator, we have 3 times 2, that is 6. So we have obtained 4 over 6, and this fraction can be simplified further. Note that a common factor of 4 and 6 is 2, so we're going to divide the numerator 4 by 2, and we're going to divide the denominator 6 by 2 as well. If we do that, we end up with 4 divided by 2, which is equal to 2, divided by 6 divided by 2, which is equal to 3. So what have we obtained? Once again, we have obtained the same result. We have obtained that the product of the two fractions is 2 over 3. So we have obtained the same answer, but we can see that since we didn't use the greatest common factor when dividing 20 and 40, we ended up having to simplify our result further. Now let us have a look at a few practice problems. Consider the first problem. We have 10 over 21 times 7 over 15. So let us identify the numerators and their opposite denominators. Consider the numerator of the first fraction, that is 10, and what is the opposite denominator? That will be the denominator of the second fraction, that is 15. Next, consider the numerator of the second fraction, that is 7, and the denominator of the first fraction, that is 21. This will be the opposite denominator. So what we're going to do first is we're going to look for common factors between 10 and 15. Note that 5 is a common factor, so we divide 10 by 5 to obtain 2, and we divide 15 by 5 to obtain 3. Next, consider the common factors of 7 and 21. 7 is a common factor, so we divide 7 by 7 to obtain 1, and 21 divided by 7 is 3. So what do we end up with? We end up with 2 over 3 times 1 over 3. So the resultant fraction, to obtain the numerator of that, we will multiply the numerators of the original two fractions, and to obtain the denominator, we will multiply the denominators of the original two fractions. So we have 2 times 1, which is 2, divided by 3 times 3, which is 9, and so this is our required answer. That is 10 over 21 times 7 over 15. This is equal to 2 over 9. Let us move on to the next problem. Here we have 18 over 11 times 33 over 2. So what is the numerator of the first fraction? That is 18. And what is the opposite denominator? That will be the denominator of the second fraction, that is 2. Next, consider the numerator of the second fraction, which is 33. And what is the opposite denominator? That will be the denominator of the first fraction, that is 11. So let's look for a common factor between 2 and 18. 2 is a common factor. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 18 divided by 2 is 9. And let us look for a common factor between 11 and 33. 11 is a common factor. 11 divided by 11 is 1. And 33 divided by 11 is 3. So what do we end up with? We end up with 9 over 1 times 3 over 1. So we write the fraction line. In the numerator, we multiply the numerators of the original two fractions. And in the denominator, we multiply the denominators of the original two fractions. So we have 9 times 3, which is 27, divided by 1 times 1, which is 1. And 27 divided by 1 is 27. So this is our required answer. That is 18 over 11 times 33 over 2 is equal to 27. Let's have a look at our next problem. We have 4 over 9 times 3 over 8. Now the numerator of the first fraction is 4, and the opposite denominator is the denominator of the second fraction, that is 8. And the numerator of the second fraction is 3, and the opposite denominator is the denominator of the first fraction, that is 9. Now let's look for a common factor of 4 and 8. 4 is a common factor. If we divide 4 by 4, we obtain 1. If we divide 8 by 4, we obtain 2. Next, we look for a common factor of 3 and 9. 3 is a common factor. If we divide 3 by 3, we will obtain 1. And if we divide 9 by 3, we will obtain 3. So we end up with 1 over 3 times 1 over 2. So we write the fraction line. We multiply the numerators of the original two fractions and write that in the numerator. And in the denominator, we multiply the denominators of the original two fractions. So we end up with 1 times 1, which is 1, divided by 3 times 2, which is 6. And so this is our required answer. That is 4 over 9 times 3 over 8 is equal to 1 over 6. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. See you next time.